Hello, good evening, everyone. My name's Sean Prendergast, and I'm going to be hosting tonight's Pétanque Show. The show is going to be aimed at the mental side of pétanque, mental strength, and looking at that side of things. Tonight, joining me is Jamie Brooks. He is one of our most talented junior players. He has progressed over the years and has become a really successful player, playing in many competitions, getting to lots of different finals. So he will hopefully go on to be one of the top adult players as well. So Jamie, first of all, touching on the mental aspect of just life in general with how COVID's been, how have you found COVID? And from a pétanque perspective, have you managed to get out and practice?
With the first lockdown, it was kind of like, obviously it was my last year of high school, so it's kind of, last year was meant to be kind of like the big years, have GCSEs, go to prom, go to college, do all this kind of stuff. And then it kind of just all came to a stop quite quickly. It's kind of like, there's rumours of there being a lockdown, and then all of a sudden Boris says we're not going to school, and then he says there's going to be no exam. So it kind of, everything got kind of like put on hold. But if you remember at the time, it was kind of like everyone thought it was going to be like a month thing. We'd all go back to normal after a month. And I think slowly over time, it came to me that we're going to be in this for like a year or two. So then I thought, well, if we're going to be in lockdown for a while, I might as well go out practice. I'm fortunate. I'm only like a 5-minute bike ride away from Worthing Pétanque Train. So I'm able to just get on the bike and hop over there. And in the first lockdown, I was doing that pretty much every week. 5-6 days a week. I'll be up there 4 hours a day practicing whatever. I think Hoff started doing his live streaming competitions. That was great as well. And I think it started to like slowly fade away, I'd say, towards June, July, when we were starting to get back to a little bit of normality. I think I was then able to start getting a job, so that kind of put a lot of things on hold. And one of those things being put on hold was practicing. So it went from about, 30 hours a week practicing to then 1 or 2, pretty much.
Yeah, and that's one of the downsides also. I don't know if you feel the same, but getting out and practicing and keeping your arm in this weather is a lot more difficult as well.
Yeah.
At least in the last lockdown, it was a lot warmer in the spring and summer months. But touching on the practice side of the thing, and obviously with COVID, how are you dealing mentally with being effectively, I know obviously you managed to get out and about in the spring and summer months, but effectively being stuck between 4 walls every day, has it been tough?
Yeah, I would say so. I think, especially recently, with going to a new school, I now go to Chichester, which is, if people don't know where Chichester is, it's like 30-40 minutes away from where I live. And it's, going to there, meeting a lot of new people, and then all of a sudden putting that all on hold, I have to do it all virtually. It's, for example, today I did 6 hours behind a screen online, which isn't obviously very helpful. But it's, it's something we have to deal with, but at the same time, it is very, very difficult. Some of my age, it's, I want to be out enjoying life as much as I can. And when, even college life, it's meant to be difficult, but it's at the same time, you're meant to have fun. But it's got to the point now where I'm starting to realise that, it's not great.
Yeah, it's tough for everyone, and like you say, having college life and all your friends around would always make life a little bit easier mentally and everything like that. The reason I've touched on that and how you're dealing mentally with the moment is because obviously it is difficult for everyone, but also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're able to go out and play pétanque on a regular basis, do you find that relieves some of that mental pressure? You can go out and play the sport that you love and enjoy.
Yeah, 100%. Before I started to break onto like the national circuit, we were going like 3 years back now, it's kind of like it was a hobby. I'll go up to Worthing with my grandma, chuck some ball, you know. And it kind of like, because I kind of grew up, like started with that, and I had that for about 7-8 years. You know, I've always had it as a hobby, and then obviously gone into the national kind of circuit. It still continued as a hobby. So even though I've gone off to Cambodia, Spain, representing England quite a few times, you know, I've still gone there, and it's kind of like almost not a holiday, but it's like I'm going abroad to do a sport that I've pretty much enjoyed my whole life. So it's like, I'll say, yeah, it is like a relief, you know. I'm at college all week, school all week, you know, a lot of stress, especially amount of coursework they have to give you. And then it's kind of like the weekend, what it used to be is football on a Saturday, Pétanque on a Sunday, you know, and it's just a huge relief. And then you kind of go in on Monday, nice and relaxed, and then continue again. So,
yeah. And now we've lost that, but hopefully we'll get it back in the springtime, fingers crossed. So thanks for that, Jamie, giving a bit of an insight to how things are going for you in lockdown. The next thing I wanted to go on to is talking about mental preparation within Pétanque, how you mentally prepare, or if you do, and then we can touch on some of the elements of how mental strength is so important in our sport. So firstly, very easy, simple question. Do you mentally prepare before a competition or even in practice? Do you mentally prepare for practice, competitions, or do you neglect that side of things?
I try very hard to put myself into a mindset of what it's going to be like. And it's very difficult because obviously when you're, for example, I'll be on my own on like a Thursday after school. And, you know, it's very hard to put yourself into a mindset where you can have loads of people around you playing at the same time. So it's like when I'm practicing, trying to get into that mindset of like, I'm going to be playing against other people. You know, the way I have it set up on the screen might be different to how it's going to be. Well, it 100% will be different to how it's going to be in the game. And I think I try to put a lot of attention on like how I react when I miss a shot, when I miss a point, if I hit a ball, for example. And I think that's what I try to mentally prepare for. I think it's difficult to mentally prepare for what's going to happen, not what's going to happen, like scenarios in a game, because you don't know until you're there. So I think the mental side I prepare for is like how I deal when I miss shots, but apart from that, I probably don't focus too much on anything else.
No. And I think a lot of people probably do neglect it a little bit, the mental side of it. However, of course, it is hugely important. Just, I know this might be a slightly tough question, but when you say you try and get yourself into the mindset, and you touched on it a little bit in terms of putting yourself in practice situations that you might encounter similar to game situations. When you say putting yourself into the mindset, could you just elaborate a little bit more on that? What kind of things do you do to try and get your mind in the right place?
Trying to get my mind in the right place.
Tough question, I know.
Yeah, I think a good. We're all gonna have bad days, aren't we, when we play Pétanque?
Yep.
Everyone has it. You know, I have it more than probably most people. And it's kind of like, if I'm having a bad practice, it's kind of like to still practice. If you chuck 20 ball, miss 18 shots and then just stop. I try to practice, like, keep going, see if you can hit, I don't know, 5 shots out of 20 and then 10 shots out of 20, and just keep trying to overcome the, you know, because the problem with me is I think about what's happened in the past, and that's an issue I need to try and cut out, but try and overcome that, try and think, right, I've missed 18 out of 20, let's try and only miss 15, try and miss 10, and just try and build on that.
Well, that's good. I mean, so what I'm hearing is you try and stay determined. And determination is a big part of the mental strength in Pétanque. And the more determined you are, the more likely you are to go on and win a game, particularly if you're coming from behind. But there's one thing that you did mention, just to touch on. You did say that sometimes if you miss a couple of shots, that you think about it a little bit. Would it be fair to say that sometimes it stays in your mind for longer than perhaps you would like?
Yeah, definitely. Something that I haven't really admitted to anyone is that, I haven't said to anyone, is that when I play a competition, I always say to myself, like, this first shot of the whole day, and it sounds silly because obviously you can play between 5 and like 10 games in a day. And so I always say to myself, like, this first shot's important because if I throw this first ball really badly or not great, it will stick in my mind and I'll be trying too hard to try and correct it. Whereas if I throw that first ball and I hit it, I'll then have kind of like this relief, like okay, I've finally I've hit the first ball, I can carry on. But that can also be a bad thing because I might get too confident and then start chucking the ball silly again. So that's my problem.
Yeah. So you get quite hard on yourself if you miss a shot.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think a lot of players do that. So the question I would ask you is, would it be hard to put into words how you feel when you miss a shot? When you miss a shot, do you feel like, oh, it's the end of the world? Do you create like a story in your head as to what's going on in the game?
Yeah, I think once I begin to miss like a few shots, like I kind of like almost think, oh, like, I'm playing awful. You know, my teammates are going to start getting really unhappy with me. They're going to start dropping in performances, and it kind of just feels like I've started like World War II within my team, kind of thing. Like that's how I'm like mentally feeling, and it's kind of like, you know, you get annoyed with yourself because you know you can hit the ball. You know, we've all hit like the perfect carrot. You know, it's like perfect shot, and then when you miss a shot, it's kind of like why am I doing this kind of thing? And it's like you constantly ask that question in your head, and then before you know it, you're shooting again, and because you've been thinking of that for the last 5-10 minutes or even 1 minute, it still plays in your mind, and then you do it the next shot, and it carries on like that.
Yeah, so when you go into the circle after you've missed a shot, or when things haven't gone so well, so maybe you've missed a couple, do you then get into a negative mindset where you almost believe that you're not going to hit that ball?
Yeah, I'll be honest. If I've missed 5-6 in a row, I think that's me gone, and it's bad to say, and I play with many people that have seen me lose my head when I've missed 5 or 6 shots. And it's annoying on my behalf because I know I can hit ball. I think if it's like if I've hit 3 and then like missed 2, I can still come back because I know I've hit ball that game. I know I can like get back into the swing of it. But if it's like first 5, I'll give you an example. Scott will remember this as well if he's listening. We played Belgium and Cambodia, and it's 3rd game. We've won 1, we've lost 1. And we're playing Belgium, and the first end, they've wasted 5 shots, 5 ball, and their 6th one gets on. I have the last 2 ball. If I hit it, I think we got 4 or 5 points. I missed twice. All of a sudden, my head's gone because I've missed 2 shots for 4 or 5 points potentially. Second end, I played 2 massive hookies at 10 metres. Next end, I play another massive hooky at 6 metres. You know, who misses the ball like a metre at 6 metres? And then all of a sudden I'm stopped off the next end. You know, 5-6 shots since the start of the game in a massive competition, I'm off. And, you know, it plays on your mind. I remember it played on my mind a lot that evening. You know, it's frustrating because you're on the biggest stage and you're making silly mistakes that, you know, you can easily do better. And
so it's almost becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy and you go through a vicious cycle. You miss 1 and then you go through it. And then when you've missed a shot or say you've lost a game that you feel is quite important to you, how long does it take you to recover mentally? Could you go into the next game and start afresh, or do you find that actually goes on into your next game as well?
No, I'm quite good to be fair. I kind of always, like during the game, obviously, like it'll stick with me. But going on to the next game, I'm quite good at kind of because I find it's just like a new game. You know, I could be playing on a new terrain. You know, I might be able to like get away with shots that I missed on the first game that I could get with the second game. So I would say I'm quite good with switching into the next game. But what I will say is that if I go into the next game and I miss my first 2 shots, I think if I come off the back of a game where I've done quite badly, I think it will start to creep back in that, like here we go again. It's kind of like deja vu kind of thing.
So it's almost, so you find it quite difficult to get it back. And one thing I've noticed, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, because it's like I say, you are a hugely successful player, but one thing I do hold a passionate view on is the mental ability and how it gives you that extra edge in terms of winning games and winning competitions. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this tonight, is to hopefully provide an open and honest, frank account from you. But obviously, just to go through the importance of mental strength. There's one thing I've noticed is that when you're down in games, so I remember playing you and I was probably 8-1 up. And I got the feeling that you didn't believe you could win that game. And I think I've seen that a few times in terms of, and this is not unique. This happens with quite a few players. There's only perhaps a handful of players who have that mental strength to be able to come back from adversity. So the question I'd ask you is, when you're down in a game, do you feel more often than not, yes, I can come back and win this? Or is it the fact of, do you know what, my shooting's gone off the boil, I'm not going to win this?
No, I always believe I can come back into it. I always have the belief, like, you're a football man. I support Brighton, one of the worst teams in the country. Okay, but we could like lose 5-0 to Newcastle one week, and we could have Man City the next week, and I could still believe we can win it. I'm that type of person. So I think if I am missing 6 shots, obviously I'm frustrated, but I know like I can get back into that mindset. I know I'm like a ball or two away, like 2 perfect shots, and like bang, I've got my confidence back. And it's like, I'll go back to it's like a football fan. You lose 5 games, you think your team's rubbish. You win 2 games, and all of a sudden you beat the best team in the world. So it's the same with Pétanque. I miss 5 shots, I think I'm awful. Hit 2 shots, and all of a sudden, okay, I've got this back, and I can hopefully carry on with it.
Yeah, that's good. And that's a sign of determination, which is a really good mental strength. So just going back onto your mental preparation, how you prepare for shots, and how you prepare in games. You're a shooter, right? And you're a very good one. You hit a lot of ball, particularly when you're on a bit of a confident run. But when you're on a less confident run, so let's say you've missed a couple of ball, do you have a mental routine or just a routine in general before you go into the circle to take on a shot? Do you follow a clear routine? And when you're in the circle and you're going through a bad patch, what is going through your mind at that current time before you go and release that ball and you're about to hit that ball?
Yeah, my routine's always the same. If I'm playing bad, if I'm playing good, I'll stand at the end of the train and I'll just walk down and step straight into the circle and shoot. I'm not the one to faff around by walking up and down, stand in a circle for like 10 seconds. I hate all that because I lose concentration quite easily. I'd say when I'm in the circle, because I don't give my time to think, I can't really say how I feel in the circle, because I step into that circle and I'm just like shooting straight away. I don't really think about what's going to happen, because I don't give my time to think about that. So it's difficult to answer that question. But I would say when I'm in that circle, obviously I just believe I'm going to hit the ball, because obviously I wouldn't be on the train. I wouldn't be going into the circle to shoot the ball. So I would say I do have quite a positive approach when I'm in the circle. But obviously, like, I could come out of the circle and I'll be like a mess again. So.
Okay, so you don't necessarily have those negative thoughts when you're in your circle, which is good, because that can then hamper your play if you're doing that. The one thing I would say in terms of mental preparation, like you say with practice, it's really good to go through a pattern where you're going to put yourself in a game situation as much as possible. That helps you from a mental perspective. But there are also certain things you can do which are really useful techniques when things aren't perhaps going your way. But you can also use them just generally. They're quite helpful. Do you ever visualize a shot? Do you ever visualize yourself carrying a ball?
Yeah, all the time.
Okay.
I always think, like, I think what tends to get me, and I don't know if it's the same with anyone else, but before a competition, like, this is what I used to do back when we were playing, I would always watch a game on YouTube or on Facebook of, like, not necessarily like the top players, just some very good French players. And I'd always watch them just hit ball constantly. And it kind of like put something in my mind, like, okay, tomorrow I'll step in the circle and bang, I'll shoot the ball. Like, because I've watched someone do it, it gives me kind of like the confidence to do it myself. So when the game's like panning out, say like game next to me, you get a spot carrow. I'll be like, okay, I'll go down the terrain and bang, I'll spot carry the ball or something like that. Because it kind of gives me like that, okay, I've just seen someone else do it, I can easily do it myself, I think.
So it's almost like a response. So do you find yourself, if you're playing against someone who's panging ball consistently, do you find that lifts your level almost automatically?
Oh, I love it. I love a good game. You know, I almost like thrive when the other players like playing incredible. Obviously, it might get to a point where they're playing too good and I can't keep up with it. But if I'm playing like yourself or Dave or whoever it is, and you're shot, bang, 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 it almost kind of feels like it puts something in my mind like, okay, I need to do this if I need to help my team. Like, obviously, like if I'm not going to hit ball, we're in the mud basically because all of a sudden we're like 4v6. So yeah, when I'm playing against a good player who's shooting all the time, 90% of the time I'm kind of like in the swing of it as well.
So mentally, you respond well in that situation. What's the type of situation you don't respond too well in? Is it games where you're perhaps playing against, I don't know, the game isn't going particularly well generally, you're playing against weaker opposition? Is there a particular type of game where you think, I can't get into this?
For me, it's probably when I put too much emphasis on a game. You know, say if I'm about to say like we've just won 2 games against 2 really good teams and we're about to play a bang average team, and I'm kind of going into it, say, come on then, let's get like a 3-and fanny or something. And it's not going to happen because I'll step into that circle, I'll step onto the terrain, and all of a sudden I'm like, right, need to hit like 2 carrots ahead to like get 6 points to go and win 30-0, and it doesn't happen. And all of a sudden it mentally catches up with you that you said something at the start of the game and it's not happening. And you're like, oh, like, why is this not happening? So I'll say it's kind of like, what, as you said, like when you're not playing a great team and that you should be wiping the floor with, but you're not, kind of thing. So that kind of team probably gets me frustrated.
See, that's a really interesting answer, because what I've heard from the answers you've given, perhaps, is that you set your expectations a bit too high.
Yeah.
So, like you're saying, you're playing against a slightly average team and you expect to fanny them in 3 ends or beat them quite comfortably.
Yeah.
And sometimes in games that doesn't happen for various different reasons. And then the ability to be able to get that kind of momentum back, if you set those expectations and that bar really high, mentally that's going to be quite difficult. Yeah. And that's why going into any game, you kind of have to. They'll say it in sports like, you know, even professional football, Liverpool, if they're playing a team like West Brom, we saw they drew them 1-1, you know, because their expectation is we're going to go on the pitch and hammer them. But sometimes that doesn't work out. So that strength to be able to say, right, actually, I'm going to treat this game like any other game and go through those motions as normal is really, really important, but also can be quite difficult. So the expectation side of things, would it be fair to say that perhaps you set yourself too high expectations sometimes, not only within the game, but also I get the impression, because I've seen your head drop if you've missed a couple of balls. Sometimes I've seen you shoot quite well, say hit 65-70%, which is pretty decent, and yet I feel like you're not overly happy still with that. Your expectations almost that I need to be hitting every single ball. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I'll say I demand perfection from myself. You know, I when I play a ball, even if I play a point and it's like it's not bang on the court or it's not exactly where I want it to be, it's still like it's not good enough. And I don't know. The word I was thinking of during then is maybe I've been a bit like arrogant over the years. You know, maybe I'm thinking too much of myself. Like when I step onto a pitch against a bang average team, that I'm expecting myself to fanny them in 3 ends, which, you know, like not even you put the 3 best players in England together, it probably won't happen. So maybe it's because I've been, I wouldn't say built up by other people over the years, but I built up in myself because of performances over the last couple of years that I've won good competitions. I played for England, you know, stuff that I'm very like privileged to have done. But maybe it's built up in my head that I should be beating these teams. You know, I built up this arrogance, and maybe it's just like it comes back to bite me quite a lot of the time. So.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say you're an arrogant player by any stretch of the imagination, but there is a big difference between belief, which is right. You should have belief in your ability. You should go onto the pitch believing that you can win any game. But there's a difference between belief and expectation. And once you don't meet that expectation, then it's always going to have a negative mental impact. And that's perhaps one of the parts that you need to improve on, is the expectation side of things, because you're always going to have the ability, you know how to throw a ball, you're always going to be able to hit ball fairly consistently, but there's going to be periods where it doesn't go your way. And if you've put massive expectation on your shoulders, you're not always going to be able to meet those expectations.
Well,
do you see what I mean?
What I will tell you is I'm glad you brought this up actually with the expectation, because I had a really a deep conversation with Tony, the head of MIA, at the start of the very first lockdown, and this was a time when this is probably the worst I've been mentally in my life. Start of the very first lockdown, and I was practicing 4 hours a day. And I will admit at the start I was shooting very well. I was scoring 50, 60 pluses in the tier division. I was probably playing some of the best pétanque in my life, obviously under no pressure whatsoever or anything. And I was getting very ahead of myself. I was like, I turn up on a practice on a Tuesday morning, hit 3 carrots in a row, and all of a sudden I'll be bigging myself up. And it got to a point, I remember actually, it was probably 5 weeks into the first lockdown, it was 1 week where I was shooting awfully. I was hitting no ball whatsoever. And it got to a point where I remember I went to go up on the Friday, and I normally say to my parents, I'll see you in 4 hours or something. And I went to go up to the train. If you know where Worthing is, you can you go up the ramp, but you can go straight on and go up the South Downs. And I said, yeah. So I kind of said to myself, I was cycling up, and obviously it's playing my head because I haven't been playing well that week, practice wise. So I kind of just said to myself, right, I'm not going to go up practice day. I'm going to go up to South Downs, sit there for 3 hours, and you can get quite a nice view up on the South Downs. And I'm no joke, I sat there for about 4 hours, and I literally just sat and spoke to myself in my head, listened to music. I was kind of being brutally honest with myself, because I was setting expectations in my head. And I'm going to be honest, okay, this is I can look back on it now.
Honesty is great.
I was setting expectations that were ridiculous. Not even Dylan Rocher would even set these expectations, okay? I'm setting mental, goals, and I'll be honest, I was setting goals I'm going to go win the gold medal at the Europeans next year. I'm going to go play in the Masters next year in France. I look back on this now, and I'm like, what am I saying to myself? I'm saying this now, and I'm like, it's mental. And to think last year when I was hitting a few ball in practice, I'm thinking I'm the big deal. Everyone's going to want to play with me. And I remember I sat there for 3 hours, and I just what am I doing? And I got home. I remember, I think me and Tony might have had an argument over something. I can't remember. It came up, and I said to her, I was like, I'm being a proper idiot right now. My head's not in the right place. Mentally, I'm not here. And then, I kind of just said to her, I'm setting these expectations that aren't real. How can I get out of this? And she kind of said to me, you're in this slump at the moment. Everyone's going to get there. But it made no sense, because I was in a really good moment, and then all of a sudden I'm in a really, really, really bad moment for a week. And yeah, basically something that nobody knew apart from Tony, pretty much just said to everyone else. So there we go.
Yeah. So that's one element that obviously there can be some improvement on. But just touching on that really is that it's good to have targets and objectives, but they need to be achievable and realistic. So when you set really high expectations, the reality is that you're not going to meet them all the time, and therefore that's going to make you feel bad. And then if you're feeling bad, the likelihood of you being able to perform at a high level is decreased. That's why you need to it's good to set realistic, achievable targets and look to meet them. But the other thing with raising things like expectations, and touching on what you said briefly about when you go into some games, you feel like you need to, or you should be winning it quite comfortably in that. The other thing, and I say this as someone who struggled with my shooting about 2 or 3 years ago, with similar situation to you actually, is that what happens is you go into what they call story mind. So you're creating a story in your head. So you're creating a picture of how you feel that game should go. So what you're doing is you're neglecting the process side of it. So you're creating a story, whether that be a negative or a positive story. And if you're in story mind, it makes it makes it so much more difficult to make sure you follow a clear process. That's why when people give mental tips around visualization, following a routine, feeling the situation. So when I go into the circle now, for example, and I'm about to shoot, I hear and listen to the things around me rather than focusing on the story of the game. Does that kind of make sense? So if I can hear the wind in my ears, or
Yeah.
I can feel the sensation on my arms, it stops me getting into the story of the game. Because what happens is, with those expectations, you build up a story, and that can have quite a negative mental impact. So it's Martin Hughes will love me for saying this, but he's absolutely right. It is about following the process rather than looking at outcomes. Once you start getting to outcome thinking, then it makes it harder to be able to claw things back. Because even when you're in, they say story thinking or action thinking. Even when you're in action thinking, which is the positive mental frame, you're still going to miss ball because we're not Dylan Rochette. So we are still going to miss ball. That's the reality. But you're following the right process. And if you do that, you'll find that your technique and the way you throw it will be so much better. So when you do miss a ball, you won't beat yourself up about it, because the likelihood is you'll only just miss it. You know you've thrown it nice, and you know you can continue just to go through that process. Once you start to build an expectation and story in your mind, then, like I say, it can go to a situation where you start hooking it to the left, hooking it to the right, because that story becomes too much. I haven't won this in 3 ends. What's going on? And that story overtakes you, and it takes over your mind. So I do know where you're coming from in that respect. Have you ever taken any time to explore your negative feelings when you're like you said, you had a chat with Tony when you were struggling in games, or when things aren't going your way? Have you ever come off the piece at the end of the day and given an honest assessment to yourself or to other people about what you could have done better, what you did well, if you like, giving yourself a critique of your game, but a reasonable one?
I do it every competition, really. I think if I could have the perfect day on the competition, I still would find something to critique about. And I normally play with like honest players. I played with the likes of Steve Dakin, Callum, Steve Lombard. People that would be brutally honest with me. And like if I'm doing something, like maybe I'm not doing something as good as I should be, or like if like something mentally I'm not doing right, or like how I'm acting. So Steve Dakin is the best, at talking to after a competition. Even if I'm not playing with him, or like I could play against him in the final, he'll still talk to me afterwards and just be like, you're doing this wrong. You need to, or not doing it wrong, but you need to improve on this if you want to continue your game.
Yeah.
And it's like another one's Graham Elkin, you know as well. I travel quite a lot with him, to go up and down the country. And we would sit in the car for like 3 hours on a journey, and he would talk to me about like what I do mentally, like, because he knows me like in and out. I see him every week, or I used to see him every week. And he was another one that he kind of just like he would explain stuff to me that I haven't thought of before. It kind of like it kind of like opened doors in my mind to like other things, and then I'll play another competition and think about that thing and be like, oh, I see what he means now, kind of thing. And it's funny, every time you say something and then I play competitions, someone else will bring it up, and I'll say it to him the next day, and he'd be like, yeah, but I told you that like 3 weeks ago. And it's kind of like, oh, it's like opening up now.
That's good. And getting feedback from your peers is really important. Constructive criticism is how you improve, whether that be with technique, but most of the time when you get to a certain level, the cutting edge is always going to be the mental side of it. But also when you get that feedback, and the feedback you're giving yourself as well, is that you mustn't beat yourself up about the things that didn't go so well. It has to be an honest assessment from either your peer or from yourself about, yes, this is what went well, this is what went well, this is what didn't go so well, and this is what I'm going to improve on for the future. That's really important when you're taking back that that feedback. So I'm really glad that you get that constructive feedback from your peers, and I know that Steve Dakin has got a fantastic mentality. Not only that, but he's very fair as well. So he wouldn't say, "Oh, like you were terrible there, Jamie." He's not like that. So that's the thing. You need to get the right people giving you the right feedback, because overly harsh criticism is not beneficial. It needs to be kind of the constructive criticism you get from a player or a peer needs to be something you can relate to, so you can improve on it. That's really, really quite important.
Yeah.
So I'm really, really pleased that you do that. But also in a game, what we all have a habit of doing if we lose it is we can always just focus on what went badly. But the truth of the matter is, unless you probably get fannied in 3 ends, then probably nothing did go particularly well. But generally, 90% of the time in a game, there'll still be things that went well. And building on those strengths is really, really important. So in terms of your actual play, and again, you don't have to agree with me on this. I'm just giving you feedback from what I've seen.
Go ahead.
But I would say shooting wise, I know sometimes your head can drop, and we've gone through that, and we've talked about the ins and outs, and you've given a really open, honest assessment. But the one thing I would say, where from a mental perspective, is something that you could really work on and see if you agree. And I would say that's your pointing game.
Yeah.
Is your pointing game. I feel like, would it be fair to say that sometimes you overcomplicate the pointing side of your game?
Yeah.
And tell me, give me a brief summary of how you feel when you're pointing.
When I step into the circle, I know from practicing, like when I'm under no pressure, I can. I'm not going to sound cocky or anything, but I believe I can play one of the best high lobs in the country when I'm nice and relaxed. Like there's been times where I can chuck a ball at 10 meters on the rockiest terrain, it will just land dead next to the gosh, and it will kind of get to a point where like, I'm in a game, and it could be like a big point in the game, and we need like a good point, and I'll step in a circle, and all of a sudden I don't feel confident to play that ball. Like, I don't feel confident to play the high lob or play the ball that I've been playing well all day. And I'll play a different point that I haven't really been doing all day, and obviously it will go wrong because I'm trying. Maybe I've seen someone else in the game do it, so I'm trying to copy them, and obviously it won't suit my play. And I think the main thing for me is just not committing to the point. I don't commit to points during the game. That's the thing that really frustrates me, and it's straight down from when I play like a local charity event or if I'm at the World Championships. I will never commit to a point, and that's the one thing that bugs me. And it's difficult to get to the mindset of playing a committed point in practice, because obviously I can do it in practice because I'm under no pressure. I can play the high lob, and it frustrates me that I can do it in practice and I can never go into a game and play the really nice aggressive point or high lob and get it perfect like 8 out of 10 times. You know, obviously the 2 times it will go bad, but it's just, you know, I can't replicate what I do in practice in a game. So
yeah, so again, I think it is probably expectation there again. So when you're in practice, you're lobbing them up, you're landing right by the cosh. When you go into a game, you throw your first point, it doesn't quite work out how it did in practice. And again, you're thinking, why is that? Why is it that all of a sudden, and then you go back into story thinking, you go in the circle, you get anxious about throwing it because you're in that, well, I can do it in practice, but it's not happening in the game. Now, one thing I'd say about that is a high lob has its place, particularly on rocky terrains, definitely. But one way you can get your confidence back in pointing, and pretty much anything in life actually, is sometimes going back to basics. Now, that doesn't mean you just neglect the lob altogether, because a high lob is a really important shot, definitely. So I would never advocate just scrapping a high lob. But sometimes when you're struggling with your pointing, to get back into that action frame mind, it's not a bad idea to go back to basics and just actually kind of thinking about your action as you go through a process rather than your expectation mind again. I can lob a high ball, I should be able to do it on any terrain is probably what's going through your mind. Sometimes that doesn't happen, and sometimes you do need to adjust your type of point to get back into that right mental frame of mind, and then that lob will start coming back again and you'll be able to use it more often. But going back to basics on particular terrains will be really beneficial to your mental strength. I have absolutely no doubt about that, because you have a lovely technique. You know how to hold the ball, you know how to throw it. So going back to that basics and going in a process-driven way will really help your mental strength, because you're just raising your expectations so high that you can't meet them. Because lobbing a high ball consistently 8 out of 10 times is a very difficult thing to do. It doesn't mean to say that you can't get there at some point, but don't underestimate how difficult it is. Even the top French players would find that pretty tricky, 8 out of 10 times. So I think a lot of it does come back to expectations again, and kind of managing those expectations in your own mind as well. Having that belief, but managing those expectations. So we've covered a lot around this. So I just wanted to, just in your opinion, who would you say in Pétanque, and not including myself at all, other than myself and Steve Dakin, who we've talked about, who would you say that you could potentially learn something from the mental side of the game? Or have you learned anything from?
Do you know what? I played with Matt Everson last year. I've never played with him before. I played against him like 1 or 2 times, and I played with him with Scott last year at Harrow. And I'll be honest, it was probably one of the worst performances I had all year, and I felt really bad because like we did quite well compared to compared to how we did, like, so we got far, but I played awful. And no matter how bad I was playing, he was like so just like he was relaxed. Like I could miss 2 shots, and he would like step in a circle, bang out one ball, and he kind of like he would have a laugh about it, kind of like, you see, I should have done that in the first place, kind of thing. It's kind of like I talked about earlier. If I miss like 3 or 4 shots in a row, I kind of get up on myself, and I think that's one of the only days where I miss like 10 shots in a row, and like I still feel like I was playing quite well going into my 11th shot, and it was mental because he was just so nothing stands out about what he did, but it was just like it was like maybe he laughed and joked about it, maybe it was just like how he played, you know, like his persona on the pitch. And I think like him and like the other 2 lads, like Phil Winston, like we're going back a bit, and Johnny, and like all the just like nice relaxed players. And it's just, I think, just like watching them, playing against them, and obviously playing with Matt, you know, it was just like a good environment to be around.
And again, that comes back to an unwavering belief that you can still win. So the amount of times I've seen Matt, for example, be like 8 or 9-0 down and come back and win is remarkable, to be perfectly honest. In fact,
he did that against me at Hailing last year.
Yeah, Hoff will say he's not happy unless he can see Matt losing a game, then he knows he'll probably win. So, I mean, it is actually remarkable. And that comes down to belief, and a belief that actually it will come back. So if his point is not going well, he believes that it will come back. And that's part of mental strength as well, determination and belief. Yeah, it will come back. I'm struggling at the moment, but in a couple of ends, a couple of carrows, game back on. And that is a really important strength. The players who generally that you see who have that winning mentality, that mental strength, are often the ones that have a lot of comebacks. So you look at the likes of Ross. Ross is one of the most gritty, determined players I've probably ever played with or against. You got the likes of Rowley, for example. Rowley never knows when he's beaten, and he has such a relaxed attitude. If he misses 2 balls, you wouldn't know if Rowley's playing good or bad.
Do you know what? I love playing against him. I really do. He's like one of those players that like I'll play against him, and like I could be 12-0 up, and he can still like just be like the happiest man on this planet. It's amazing. And that's a really good attitude, because if you look at other sports, the body language is also really important. So just, you know, and I'm not getting negative on you at all. I'm just hoping that other people kind of learn something from it. But what you can do is you can give your opposition ammunition to raise their game with body language. So one thing I'll say is it's quite obvious when you play you if you're having a bad time. Yeah.
Does that make sense? So you can really see in your body language, if you miss a couple of shots, your body language just gives off a kind of negative vibe. And what that can do is it can spur on the opposition. So you look at the likes of Rowley, Matt is a very good example. They're two very good examples, actually. There are, of course, other players. But if you notice, 90% of the time, their face and their body language stays exactly the same.
Stone face.
Whether they're 12-0 up or 12-0 down, you can rarely tell. And actually, it's a really important part of any sport, actually, because you don't want to give that opposition just any extra edge. And you learn that through belief, really. And you will, there's no doubt in my mind, you're going to go on to be a really successful player. I really mean that. I think you've got tremendous ability. You're one of the best juniors we've had in this country for a long time. But it's really good, obviously, to have this conversation tonight, but to learn from those types of players as well. Just pick up little cues from them. Learning from other players, like you said earlier about watching the French players, all that kind of stuff is really important. And you probably do that as well through your coaching sessions with Tony, which is really beneficial. But learning from those types of players, particularly as you get older, will really help in your the mental side of things. So we've covered a lot, and you've been really open and honest tonight, Jamie, about your strengths and your weaknesses in terms of the mental aspect of the game. So before we end, have you got any kind of like questions or queries or anything else you wanted to share in regards to your game at all?
I don't believe so. No. No, it's how I'd be honest. I haven't played much recently. I think in a way that's been beneficial because I played a lot. Like 2019, I was playing 2 competitions at the weekend and then 3-4 times in the week. So I was probably topped out this year. I think obviously coronavirus has been it's been a mess. Okay, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'd say for me it's almost been like a little bit of a blessing in disguise. Kind of give me a bit of a break from Pétanque, kind of like reset and like you remember that 4-week coronavirus, 4-week lockdown we had back in like November.
Yeah.
I picked up a ball the Tuesday before that, and I haven't picked up a ball since then. I picked up a ball 2 days ago. That was the first time for like 2 months. It's kind of like not picking up a ball and then going out and kind of just like playing with. I didn't care kind of attitude, and it's kind of like it was nice again. It's kind of like back to how I used to play back when I was like 8-9 years old. You know,
I hear you. You almost rediscover that love a little bit more.
Yeah.
And sometimes a break can be really good because there is such a thing as overplaying. So sometimes that break is good, and we can look forward to better times as the spring comes, hopefully. And going into next season, are you going to be playing? Are you going to be competing, participating?
No idea, if I'm honest. I'm working a lot at the moment. I think every day I'm not at college, I'm working. So obviously we'll have to see what happens. I think I'll probably try and play the national events. Phil Bradshaw's already asked me for the one in April, which I
see. People are already tapping you up, mate. They're already tapping you up.
To be fair, I was meant to play with him last year at the Gravesend, and he asked me, and I said yeah, and then I realised I said yes to Callum, so I had to go back and say no, and I said I played with him this year. So, but no, and I think because obviously that we're planning on going to the Europeans in June, the juniors. I think it's kind of because I'll be quite busy with college and work. It's trying any opportunity I do get is to play with the juniors. So any national event I do play, it'll probably be with the juniors, which is obviously a good thing because we can then play as a team against some of the high level. And then I think for me this year, if it does go back to normality, it's just about. I used to play all the local competitions. So I think it's kind of like trying to step away from that. Not because they're bad. I love playing local competitions, seeing all the local faces and everything. But I think it's because of how busy I am to try and just play the bigger competitions when I can.
That's good. And yeah, and actually, it sounds like you're going to be going into next season feeling quite relaxed. I get that sense from you that you're like, you know what, this is going to be. I'm not going to have so much expectation and pressure on my shoulders. Yeah. I'm just going to go into it nice and relaxed. So I think
my mum said I've kind of like adopted like I don't really. She said other words obviously, but like I don't care attitude. Like even around the house, I'm just like I think I've kind of just almost got relaxed. Like, I've had like all this dump of negative energy over coronavirus. Like obviously it's been a negative time, and obviously I've had my really bad moments. But I think now at the start of the new year, it's kind of just trying to go in almost like a hobby again. I think I took it too seriously. It's trying to just get back to being a hobby and, realise it's not, I'm not playing in a World Cup final. I'm playing a sport where you just chuck metal ball at metal ball. So.
And that's a really good mindset to be in. So I'm really pleased to hear that. And it sounds like you're going to be going into next season with a really relaxed attitude. So I think, Jamie, we will leave it there for tonight's session. Like I say, thank you for being so open and honest. It's really refreshing. We've had a good chat around the mental aspects of things. I'm just going to leave on a couple of bits of advice, really. I'm no clinical psychologist or mental health expert in that sense. But what I would say is I went through a period myself where I had similar feelings to you in regards to certain things, but probably worse, and my shooting deteriorated somewhat. And there's 2 books I would recommend to yourself or anyone listening tonight, and they are Mindset and Ahead of the Game. Both of them are good books. They're both similar. They talk about similar things. And I would recommend, they won't set you back too much money. If ever you're thinking, do you know what, I want to get that extra edge and improve my mental side of the games, Mindset and Ahead of the Game are 2 really good books.
Yeah. So, I believe I've got Mindset already.
Oh, okay. So excellent. So. Gives you something to refer back to. It's a very good book. And the other thing, of course, is that with the situation we find ourselves in with COVID, the reality is it is okay to not be okay. It's very cliche, but it is. And if anyone's ever struggling, please talk to someone. And I include you that in, Jamie, whether it be Pétanque related or in general life, because the more we listen to each other and help each other, the better society we can create in terms of dealing with mental health issues. So thank you, Jamie, for tonight. And I hope 2021 is a successful year for you, Pétanque wise and in life. So good night, mate. All right, take it easy.
Cheers. Thank you.